I had sold that company when I was 17 years old. My parents had to sign part of the acquisition papers. When we went out to raise money, we qualify our investors. It's not the other way around. We make sure that what are you going to actually do for my business? The most important thing to raising money is showing momentum to investors. With Hypercard, we built the first AI-first expense management solution that automates everything. Automates expense submission, receipt capture, automates review, and we created a first of its kind corporate card that has no liability to the company. Had an opportunity a couple years ago to meet Sam. I told him, hey, I just sold my company. I'm thinking about starting something new. And he said, okay, here's my phone number, stay in touch. I really think that having the business fundamentals that come with running a bootstrap business, those translate very well now into us running a venture-backed business. If Hypercard makes me $10 billion, I'm gonna start another company after this. Like, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life.
So you saw a company with a middle school diploma.
Middle school diploma. That's the most I'll ever have.
Hello guys, welcome back to the Interlix Podcast, episode 16. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you guys to a very unique entrepreneur. He went to college at Fintech, saw his first company at 17, and partnered up with Amex to build a credit card called Hypercard. And you know, it's just a crazy, I think we'll say, stories. So thank you so much, Nikolas, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So yeah, you know, obviously, you know, like you started entrepreneurship very young, you know, and I think for me that's impressive when I was reading your bio. So, you know, let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me a bit more about your upbringing, you know, where you're from and what led you to start coding at 7?
Yeah, so I'm from Seattle, Washington, you know, home of big tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, etc. But I'm actually the first American in my family, and none of my parents work in tech. And when I was, you know, a kid, I stumbled across a coding video on YouTube, and I got hooked from that moment. Like, I started going through the YouTube rabbit hole. You know, usually those rabbit holes last a night, but for me it lasted, I mean, to this day. Like, I've been just studying, building things since then, and that was when I was 7 years old. So I got really lucky that I found what I love doing from a very young age. And once you find what you really love doing, it's very easy from there, right? Yeah. It's very easy to work very hard on something that you really love. And so, you know, that's kind of my background. Is I'm technical. I've at this point probably touched, you know, almost every single stack when it comes to building things, from hardware to software, game dev, mobile dev, full stack web, everything. And I learned from YouTube.
Wow. So YouTube was your school.
That was my school. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah. So tell me, you grew up in Seattle. Then you're in middle school, you finished middle school, and then you, at 15, you're like, hey, you dropped out of high school. So
yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about, you know, that process? Why did it happen?
Yeah. Well, even before that, I was building a ton of projects, right? The thing that's amazing about coding is that, unlike almost any other profession, you can be a no-name, no-face, you know, kid in your bedroom and build something for the entire world to go and use and benefit from. And so it was an amazing way for me to build my ideas and bring my ideas to life. And so before I even went to college, I'd built a ton of, you know, projects, and even to this day, some of those, well, most of them failed, to be honest. You know, 99% of things that you're going to build, especially in the early days, they're going to fail. But some of them, you know, got a couple million downloads on the App Store, or, you know, they actually worked out. My first, like, probably business was, I was 12 years old. And I didn't know what business was, right? I just had an idea for something, and I saw, okay, well, maybe I can, you know, make money from this. And it was actually, I saw on Instagram a clip of a fidget spinner. Like, you know, those fidget spinners that you spin, and they went viral. But I saw a clip of it, and I was like, hey, I could build one of those. So I bought a 3D printer, and it was before, like, the wave of fidget spinners became big. And I bought a 3D printer. I bought a bunch of bearings, like these things that spin. And I just made like 50 fidget spinners, and I brought them to school with me, and I sold them there. And I was also a competitive gymnast for 10 years. I brought them to my gymnastics gym, and I sold them. And the 50 went by in like a couple days, and I made more. And I had at one point 5 3D printers in my room running 24/7. Like, I'd be sleeping. You know, if 3D printers are loud.
Yeah.
They would be running 24/7. I'd be sleeping with them running. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, put on 5 more print batches. And I just fell in love with the idea of, like, building something that other people, you know, could benefit from or liked using, or whatever it was, building things. And I remember it was crazy. From that business, I don't even want to call it a business, it was just a little project. I remember I was driving home from my gymnastics practice with my gymnastics coach who would carpool me home. And he told me when I was like 12 years old, he was like, hey, how many did you sell this month? And I was like, I sold 900. And he was like, Nick, you made more money than I did this month. He's like my gymnastics coach. And, you know, I didn't care about the money. I spent all that money investing into new projects and stuff. But the point is that I really found what I love doing. And so I was 15 years old and I went to a small high school in Seattle, you know, 40 kids in my grade.
40 kids.
40 kids.
Oh, wow. Very small.
Very, very small. And because it's a small grade, like they didn't have all the classes that I'd want to learn from, right? They didn't have computer science classes or coding classes or the things that I loved. And so I decided, I was like, hey, you know, what if I can just apply to college right now? I like did a quick Google search and I was like, can I take the SAT before I'm 18? It's like, yes. And like, do I need to have a GED to go to college? It was like, no. So I was like, okay, I might as well try. So I applied to literally one school. I was like shot in the dark, applied to this school, University of Washington. Yeah. They actually have an amazing computer science program and took the SAT.
What you got on the SAT?
I got a 1500, which I was very happy with. I think that was like the best score I'd even gotten. So I tested pretty well. I didn't really study too much because I didn't know if like that was going to be my path I wanted to take. But it was a great decision. I ended up starting at the University of Washington when I was 15. I don't have a high school diploma to this day. And as I'll tell you more about, at that time, when I started college, I also started a healthcare company and eventually ended up leaving college to work on that.
Wow. I think that's just impressive, man. I think that's a very unique story, and just hearing how you were so young and so driven to like build things. Because at the end of the day, that was what made you happy, you know, building things. And I think that's crazy. And okay, so my first thought that comes to my mind is, what was your family thinking about you know, going to college at Fintech, building many different apps? What was their reaction to all of these accomplishments?
I think that there's an interesting thing where when you ask like a 5 or a 6 year old, a young kid, you know, in like kindergarten, they ask you like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a president. I want to be like some crazy ambitious goal. And for some reason, when we get older, like a lot of people lose that goal. Like reality sets in like, oh, I can't be a president. I can't be an astronaut. I can't be an inventor or whatever. And I think, I don't know, for me, my parents were they were very supportive of what I wanted to do. If I told my parents I wanted to be like a ballet dancer, they'd be like, that's great. I'm going to support you the best way you can be, the best ballet dancer you want to be. And so I never really like lost that ambition when I was a kid. It's almost like naivety. Like I think naivety is an extremely important skill or something to have when you're a founder, because the naive ones are the ones that are not scared away to start in the first place. Yeah. Like when you're naive, you're like, oh, why can't I go and start a credit card company? Like, why not? And when you get a year into it, you're like, oh shit, now I realize why this was actually really hard. But at that point, you're like, okay, well, I've learned this much already. Like, why can't I keep going? Yeah. So naivety is like a really important skill to get you started into something. Yeah.
No, definitely. One of my mentors always says, sometimes you have to be a bit stupid to start. Yeah. And like you said, naive, because you don't know what you're getting into yourself in, but you figure out on the process. So, okay, so now Nikolas is in college at Fintech. Mm-hmm. And when you started business, did you have a business partner? How this idea came to be?
Yeah. So I met my co-founder for my first company, Spira. It was a healthcare company. And we started out building a low-cost 3D printed medical device. Like literally threw a dart on the dartboard and like picked an idea and started building it. Like there was no thought process behind like, what are we going to start to build? Which I actually think is like, especially when you're young, kind of the right approach. But regardless, I met my team, other students within University of Washington, and I had spent a lot of time working in the PhD labs at University of Washington, working on medical devices and stuff like that. And so we started working together on this like project, and eventually one of us was like, hey, let's take this seriously. Let's build a company out of it. And we started to do that. And it's slowly, instead of spending 10 hours a week on it, we spent 20 and then 40 and then 80 and then 100-hour weeks. And I was, I was failing my classes, to be honest. And, I think the hardest thing was the first iteration of that company completely failed.
Yeah.
Like that's what happens for a lot of entrepreneurs, is that the first time they get at it won't work. I think like the only difference between what defines a good entrepreneur and an entrepreneur that, is not great is how many times do you get hit in the face and then just stand back up again. And like for some founders, you can get hit in the face 20 times in a row, knocked down 20 times in a row, and you just have to keep getting back up. I think even like Travis Kalanick had started like 10 companies before Uber and they had all failed.
Yeah.
So we failed with that iteration. We failed with the next iteration. And then finally we landed on a good iteration that worked.
Wow, and I think that's insane. And just like out of wonder, was your co-founder also the same age as you, or the same age?
Yeah. So my co-founder for my last company, he was actually in this. He also had applied to college early, and he was also from Seattle, coincidentally. And we both teamed up and started this healthcare company. We'd kind of known each other before we went to college, and so I think we kind of coordinated. Went to college early. We started this company together, and like I said, it was a healthcare company. And the iteration that actually worked was we basically built a smart intake, like patient intake solution, where patients could fill out essentially forms that could connect to medical devices like blood glucose meters. And if their blood glucose spikes, then send the patient this type of form, fill out this form. So like very like smart rule sets applied to patient intake. And it was used by private practices who were using paper forms before. They would use our solution so that they could just text their patients a link and get information before their visit. Or it was used by telemedicine companies who wanted to build really dynamic and complex patient intake flows for patient engagement, or collection of symptoms or anything like that. And during COVID, that business started to do really well. And we powered a number of private practices, big and small companies, ranging from private practices to telemedicine companies. And I dropped out of college to work on that full time. And that was something, like I mentioned before, my parents were very supportive, but my parents are also, pretty traditional in the sense that like they don't want their kid to have a middle school diploma like I have today. I don't know if that's traditional, but like it's a pretty normal thing for a parent to think. And so, after, I think though, after they started to see the business do well and gain more traction, they were like, okay, this is actually a real company. And eventually, it was great. Eventually we sold the company to a late stage healthcare company called Galileo Health. I had sold that company when I was 17 years old. My parents had to sign part of the acquisition papers, and I worked on that company for 3 years or so, and then moved to the acquirer.
So you saw a company with a middle school diploma.
Middle school diploma. That's the most I'll ever have.
Wow. No, I think that's just, I'm listening here to the story. I'm like, this is out of a movie. They have to do a Netflix show.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think like, before we go into Hypercard and what you're doing now, I think my last question for you when it comes to like this business, how were you able to acquire clients, being like so young? Because, obviously even now, like for me, I'm 23, I go to a meeting, they don't take me serious because, I have no beer, I'm a young guy.
Yeah.
But you at, 15, 16, like how were you able to close these deals?
I think that being young is actually a superpower, because when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, you'll get your foot in the door, right? It's getting your foot in the door is oftentimes not the hard part. The hard part is like staying in the room. Like people will take a call with you because you're young, but then they won't sign a deal. That's what we saw a lot. They're like, oh, I'll help this kid out for his school project. And like, I'll spend 20 minutes with him. But I think you have to prove yourself 5 times over in expertise and domain expertise and knowledge to be able to stay in the room. Like you need to, when you get on a call with, in our case, with my last company, we were talking to technical folks, or even sometimes CMOs, chief medical officers, or clinical content writers, etc. We would have to, as a 16-year-old, get on that call and actually teach them something about their business. Like it was almost consultative. Like we would look at their business and be like, it has to be very logical, because a lot of the times they won't trust your word. So you have to really explain what you're saying. And so the long story short is that being young, you'll get your foot in the door, but proving that you have extreme domain expertise and really understand every detail of your business and their business, and a lot of preparation will keep you in the room, and eventually you'll be able to close a deal. And I think that's been a little bit different for me now with Hypercard.
Yeah.
Because even though I am young, I'm 21 years old now, and even though I'm young now, the validity from my last acquisition has carried over into this new company. And so now, fortunately, I've built a little bit of repertoire of me.
Yeah.
And so that's been pretty helpful. It's been a shortcut, but I think I could do it without that too.
Wow. So, now that we're getting into the Hypercard, can you tell the audience watching the podcast, what's Hypercard? Like, simple and easy, yeah?
Yeah, so Hypercard is an AI-first expense management and corporate card solution. And so essentially when you look at expense management, which by the way is essentially the idea, it's very simple in the idea. It's, you have an employee, they need to go spend money on a client dinner or a work-related travel or anything, and you need to pay for that. It's like at the highest level, this very simple what expense management is. Today, it's a very, very manual process. And what that means is, let's say your company with a couple hundred employees, you have typically one executive assistant for every 3 to 5 employees. That executive assistant spends 30% of their time filing expense reports. And if you don't have an executive assistant, then you know how painful it is to work with some of this legacy technology like Concurs of the world, Workdays of the world, Chrome Rivers of the world, etc. And so on the flip side, when an employee does submit an expense report, submit something for reimbursement, there's a whole team, a back office team, which reviews those expense reports. And it's usually one back office person for every 5 employees at the company. And the time to review that expense report in cost is $56 on average. And that's according to the Association of Fraud Examiners. And so there's this huge manual process in expense submission. And people every time, you can ask one person, what's your experience been like with Concur submitting expense reports? And I promise you, they won't say something good. And so with Hypercard, what we did is we completely rethought expense management from the ground up. And we used a very first principles lens to think about, okay, well, what if there's another way that we could get the receipt so that an employee doesn't need to collect their receipts? We can just get it for them. What if there was a way that we could automatically review those expense reports for the back office team so that instead of one back office employee for every 5 employees, there's one back office employee for every 50 employees, right? What if we could use AI to automatically review all your expense reports? What if we could use AI to enable companies to ask in plain English, hey, how much money would I save if I enabled only economy flights for flights less than 600 miles? So basically what Hypercard is in one line is this AI first expense management and corporate card product. And I didn't really even talk about our corporate card where, we partnered with American Express as our network of our card to create a very unique type of corporate card product. It's actually not a corporate card. I can get more into that later, but it's a very unique type of card product.
Oh, wow. So let's say I have employees and, obviously there's the business expenses. I could just give them a card from the business with Hypercard, and then it would automatically, let's say, they are traveling or they get, they have like their business expense. They don't have to submit a report. It just goes automatically.
It goes automatically. But here's the thing that we've done that's really unique is that we still have probably the most modular and robust set of rules to make sure that the money that your employees are spending is within your policy. Yeah. So I'll give you an example.
So they cannot take, because that's one of the main things with employees that they take advantage of using the cards.
Third, I think if I remember correctly, again, according to that same report I mentioned earlier, 30% of expense reports are actually out of policy. Oh, sorry, it's 23% of expense reports are out of policy when they're submitted. That's a lot of money. Yeah. And a good amount of them are just getting approved. And so there was a recent report that was done that said that 6% of a company's revenue, 6% of a company's revenue is lost to out of policy spending from their employees. What if I could tell a company, I'm going to increase your revenue by 6%, like a public company. If a public company increases their revenue by 6% in a quarter, that's like huge, right? A huge company increasing revenue by 6%, that's great. But with Hypercard, they can integrate Hypercard. Instantly, we can save them that 6% of revenue using our AI to automatically screen for expense reports. And like, here's an example that I give. This is a kind of simple example, but imagine you have like 4 kids, like 4 children.
Yeah.
And you need to give them your credit card so they can go buy lunch at school or like, buy whatever they need to buy. How do you make sure that your kids are actually spending on things that you allow? Like, how do you make sure they don't just go take your credit card and go buy a bunch of toys and whatever, And so that's already a pretty hard thing for a parent. They need to they need to monitor their kids, make sure that they're spending on the right things, look at their credit card bills every month. That doesn't work if you have 5,000 people that you need to keep track of, like a company of 5,000 people spending. And so with Hypercard, again, we use AI to automatically do that for you.
So let's see a employee, they are spending on something that doesn't fit within the policies. But is there like a way that maybe it detects that it's not within the policy, or maybe it says, okay, this just go to your personal? How is that process like from the employee perspective?
So typically what companies have to do in the past is they would write logic trees, like rule sets. They would say, if the expense is over $75 and it doesn't include a receipt attached, then decline it. But what we've done is we've taken this 10 steps further with AI. So you can write your policy in plain English. You don't need to drag and drop rule sets together with a bunch of if and or statements and whatever. There's a company that I saw that had 150,000 rules in their expense policy that they wrote out line by line. 150,000 rules. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So with Hypercard, what you can do is you can write it in plain English. You can say, if my flight is more than 600 miles, then you're allowed to book business class. If it's less than 600 miles, then economy, right? You can just write that one line. Or you can write, we offer, for example, a stipend, which is essentially, we let our employees spend $20 per day on food if they're in the office. So what do we write in our policy? We say, you can spend $20 on food if you're near our office, which is, we put our address of our office. And when an employee swipes their card, we check the location of that transaction, we ensure it's within a 1 mile radius of the office, and we automatically approve it if it's under $20. And if it's over $20, we reimburse them the difference, so just the $20. So all of this stuff that would usually take, a ton of time for a back office employee, for an employee to submit, it gets done automatically.
Wow. No, I think it saves so much time. And I do stuff and I do stuff back office people. So, and I know many companies that are in need of back office because, they submit at the end of the month, then the whole accounting team has to check, make sure if it's within the policies, but you're streamlining the entire process.
Yep, that's right.
And making it more effective and easy.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy part is that employees should not be spending their time documenting how they spent the company's money.
Yeah.
They should be spending their time making the company money.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Okay. No, I think this is great. And like, let's say, I'm Google, right? And your Hypercard, you want to sell me. What are like the 3 main points that you would say like a Google executive when pitching Hypercard? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny because it was actually, I think it might have been either Google or Facebook, but there was just a press that came out that was like, they had employees buying, their toothpaste on their corporate card and buying their personal vacations, like a couple $1,000s of vacations on their personal card. And so this is a big problem, even for these big companies that have a lot of resources to try and solve it and have huge back office teams, it's still, no matter how many people you throw at the problem, things are going to slip through the cracks.
Exactly.
And so the big things for these companies is that, one, we can reduce the amount of time it takes for employees to submit expense reports, which is usually, like I said, 30% of an EA's job is submitting expense reports. It's crazy. Second, we can introduce cost savings by catching out of policy spending. So any out of policy spending, your employee buys a business class flight when they're supposed to buy an economy flight, or they took a client out to dinner, but 80% of the bill was alcohol and your policy says 30%. We can catch that instantly and make sure that you're only paying for what you approved your employee to spend on behalf of the business. And the third big point is reducing overhead of needing this huge back office team to manage your expense process, or even candidly, your finance team should not be doing manual work to generate the reports they need to see how employees are spending or where they can introduce savings.
Yeah, and I like what you said as well, going from before, if a public company making billions of dollars can have a 6% in revenue each year, it's a no-brainer for them.
Yep.
And especially now that everything is AI and automation, it is a must for companies. And I love what you're doing. But now let's go from the perspective of the employees. What are the benefits of the employees in using Hypercard?
Yeah, so what we've done, I mentioned, is that we created this American Express network card. Actually, I have some here. I can show you. This is what some of our cards look like. Here's one. You can check it out.
Thank you.
And you can see that they're custom branded for each company that we work with. So, the Lyft card is pink, the Whatnot card is yellow, the Nexar card is right there. And as an employee, you get this card. It's a metal card, heavy status in your pocket, and it comes with a bunch of personal benefits, right? The thing that was interesting to us is credit cards are ubiquitous with having great benefits, right? Like the Amex Platinum is like the top tier card product and it has great benefits, and Gen Z loves this product, right? Mm-hmm. But when you look at corporate cards, they don't offer anything to the employees that get them, right? It's weird. It's, we didn't understand why that is. So each of our cards that an employee, gets, even though it is a card for corporate spending, they get to keep their cash back. So now employees get to make money on their business spending, which is great. They get TSA pre-check. They get priority pass lounge access. They get to go to the lounges. They get things like class pass. They get things like a ton of great benefits and rewards that come on each card. And not to mention, the biggest thing of all is that you don't need to spend 4 hours a week. You don't need to block off 4 hours in your calendar to do your expense reports because they're just done for you. And so all these benefits plus that.
Wow. So it's also like, even if you are an employee, you also have your own, in a sense, reporting of your expenses, everything there. No, I think that's great. And also with American Express, it's also more of a status, like especially, and I think that's a selling point as well for companies, for big corporations. They want their employees to, have American Express. So, and now speaking about American Express, can you tell me a bit more about the story of how were you able to convince them to partner up with you and Mark?
Yeah, it's actually a crazy story. So, and I think this is what every young entrepreneur needs to do. The key thing is that if you go through the normal, actually from the beginning, if you apply for a job and you put your job application in a normal candidate pool, you're going to be evaluated like everybody else. Yeah. There's always a back door that you can go through where you can be evaluated for truly you, like 100% of what you are. And that's what we did. So as an example, I actually sent a cold email to the founder of 8 Sleep. His name is Matteo. I don't know if you've heard of 8 Sleep. No. It's a mattress company. And I told him, hey, I'm a founder. I just started my company. I'm sleeping 4 hours a night. And the little hours that I do sleep, I want to get good sleep. So can I get a discount on 8 Sleep? Because it's like a couple $1,000 and I want to get a discount. And he got back to me and he said, hey, Nick, here's a discount. Here's my code. I'm not going to say it online, but here's my code. Yeah. And I'd love to write a check. He invests in our company. He puts a benefit on our card. So now if you have a Hypercard, you can get a $500 discount on 8 Sleep. And he introduces us to a guy named Anthony Pompliano, a big guy in crypto, among other things. Pomp invests. He also introduced us to some more folks. And he introduced us to these 2 guys in Miami as well, who, funny enough, actually runs 11 in Miami, the nightclub. And they also write checks. So from the single cold email, we get these 4 investors, all top great investors they've done a lot for us. And in fact, those last 2 guys introduced us to the CEO of Amex, the CEO of the issuing bank of Amex. And so we spoke with him and we pitched him on Hypercard, and they were like, this is a really good fit for Amex, right? Because essentially what we're doing is Amex pioneered this concept of membership in your pocket. Yeah. And we're like, what if we could bring that membership and loyalty to companies that are trying to retain employees? And that's a big value prop of our card too, is that when you give your employees these top in class, world-class benefits on a status heavy card, it's membership, and it's, it makes you want to stay at that company longer. And so that's how we partnered with Amex. It all came from a single cold email to the CEO of 8 Sleep.
No, it's all about networking. I always say this. It's all about the people that you know, and you can meet people from the smaller things as a cold email or Instagram DMs. One of the mentors that has been mentoring me for the past 2 years, I met him through an Instagram comment.
Yeah.
So you never know, and that person can introduce you to many other people, and that's how you grow your network. That's how you meet other entrepreneurs and founders. That's actually how I am here,
Yeah.
Because I knew people that knew Mark.
Yeah.
So it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about networking and the people that you know. And if you really have something like Hypercard that provides value, and you can see the value and it's so clear, people are just gonna go and jump on it and go.
But I actually think that there's a nuance in that advice that is important, which is, I think networking for the sake of networking.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, go network. That's the first thing to do. I actually don't think that that's right. I think that networking is very important, but you need to have a vehicle that can capture the value of the people that you meet.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like, if you're networking to meet people, like you're not building a company, you don't have some project or some idea you're thinking about, you're just meeting people to meet people. Well, anything they tell you, they have no reason to kind of stay in touch with you or help you in any way or anything like that, right? Whereas with Hypercard, I cold emailed, the CEO of 8 Sleep. He's also a founder. He writes angel checks and he invests in our company. And he put a benefit on our card. He introduced me to 2 other angel investors, right? And so because I wasn't just like some random person asking for a discount code on his mattress, he provided all this other value for us. And now we're doing it likewise for him, where anytime he needs anything, or now we're referring customers to 8 Sleep through Hypercard. So it's important that when you are networking, you have a vehicle that's capturing the value and returning value for the person that you're networking with.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think also like you said, adding value is a must as well from the person. And also, like, one thing I have seen in my experience is that if they tell you advice and they see that you're taking action and you're moving forward and you're actually putting into action the advice that you're getting from them, that's what they like. That's from my experience. That's when they're like, okay, wow, and they keep going. And obviously, there's these founders and investors that you have reached out to, thousands of people reaching out to them. What do you think, maybe something from your personality or something that you showcase that you think that made them actually, hear you out and, stay with you in a sense of like, okay, I'm gonna actually invest in you, Nick? Do you think anything in specific that stood out from you that made them like, okay, I wanna work with you?
I think it's exactly what you said. Like, I like to help a lot of people. And when someone reaches out to me and asks for something or any kind of help, I will almost always try to be helpful in some way. I don't always have time, but I'll try to be helpful. The best thing is when I tell them something, I give them some advice, and then I see them literally the next minute, I see them get started, go do something about it. If I tell someone something, I spend 30 minutes of my time with someone and I give them advice on something. They ask me for something, they ask me for my time, I give them some advice, and then they don't do anything about it. They didn't even think about it. I'm like, I'm never going to help this person again.
Yeah.
But likewise, on the flip side of things, when I go ask someone for something and they tell me something in return, some advice, some feedback, anything, any feedback, anything, I will always run the variation, check, see if play that out, implement their advice, implement their feedback, and actually be actionable about what they told me. And like you said, whenever you do that, it shows someone that you actually listen to them and they want to keep helping you. Like, people want to keep helping people that actually listen, right? It's actually pretty simple.
So Hypercard gives a lot of benefits to employees, but why should a business use it?
Yeah, great question. So chances are that if you're a business with a couple hundred or 1,000 employees, you're losing on average 5% of your revenue due to out of policy expense reports. And the reason is that corporate cards just make it far too easy for employees to spend out of policy. I mean, you're giving your balance sheet in the pocket of every single employee with little control. And chances are as well that you're using a legacy expense solution like Concur or like Workday or Chrome River that makes it such that your employees need to time block 5 hours each week or 3 hours each week just to submit their expense reports. And so with Hypercard, we built the first AI-first expense management solution that automates everything, automates expense submission, receipt capture, automates review, and we created a first of its kind corporate card that has no liability to the company, so that when you give it to your employees, you don't need to worry about putting your balance sheet in everybody's pocket.
So we have been speaking about, all the benefits and the success of Hypercard. But, let's go from the beginning, like from you, obviously you're already having a couple of years, building Hypercard, but what were like the challenges at the beginning?
One thing that a lot of founders get wrong actually in the very beginning is the first thing that they do is they go and build their product. It's actually not intuitive. The first thing that you do shouldn't be building your product. You need to assess product marketing fit, not product market fit, product marketing fit. So you need to, if you're a consumer social app, run ads with screenshots of your product with a button that says, download app. But as soon as they download it, you collect their email and, add them to a wait list, right? Or if you're a B2B business like ours, go get a pitch deck, put it together, and go pitch a couple companies and see if you can sign anyone or get interest from anyone. Don't lie to them, of course, but tell them that this is something that you're building and is this interesting to you? And, if you're not able to sign a company from your pitch deck of your product, then chances are if the product is built, it's no different. You're not going to be able to sign them anyways. And so what we did with Hypercard, the first thing that we did is we went into our network, we looked at which companies can we talk to, and we pitched a couple of them. And right off the bat, we spoke to Lyft, and we signed an LOI, letter of intent with Lyft, with literally nothing. We had a pitch deck, a few slides that we put together in Figma, and they took a chance on us and they said, hey, this is interesting, and this could be really valuable for us. And so that was like kind of our product marketing fit moment where we realized, okay, there's something here. Now, the challenges came when we were like, oh shit, now we actually have to build a credit card. Like I didn't know how to build a credit card, right? My background before was in healthcare. And we basically, I pulled a couple all-nighters. I read every book. My co-founder and I read every single book we could about credit cards, about payment space. We spoke to as many people as we could to learn as much as we could. And eventually we just got started on that process. But it's not an easy process at all. It requires you to raise millions of dollars specifically to build a credit card, raise lots of debt, something that, I didn't even know how debt worked a couple of years ago. And but that, as I said earlier, that naivety of being young and not really knowing how challenging it's going to be is what pushed me to keep going.
Wow. I think, going from the first part, I think what you said about how to follow in the need for a service or a product is key. When I was starting my business, for me, it was so easy to test out ideas because what I did is I would try to solve something without having it. I would try to solve the idea.
Yeah.
For example, if idea came about a specific startup, I would go to the working events and I would be saying that, I had the idea, I was building it and see people interested. Some people like, oh, I want to book a meeting to learn more. But then that helped me so much because I didn't have to build anything. I was just selling the idea of it.
Yep.
And by seeing if they were interested of them booking meetings with me, I saw right away, okay, there's a need for this, there's a need for this.
Yep.
And you can test out ideas. So any, startup founder, first try to sell your idea without having it. And if it works, start
building. And actually, I think probably the most important skill that you can have when you're that early in as a founder, it's actually pretty surprising. It's not, being an engineer, it's not being a good salesperson or anything. It's actually being a good designer, surprisingly. And I'll tell you why. Because if you're raising money or you're trying to pitch your first customers, if you have beautiful designs, they're going to think that you're a lot farther along than you actually are. And if you are not a great designer yourself, go hire a designer for a couple $1,000s to go over your investor pitch deck, go over your customer pitch deck, and just make it look actually beautiful, make it look like a real company. Like if you go to right now, hypercard.com, you'll see that our website is beautiful.
It looks 10 out of 10.
It looks 10 out of 10. And that's what it looked like. Imagine, that's what it looked like a couple years ago. Not as good as it is now, but something very similar in terms of how good it looks. That's what it looked like a couple years ago. And we hadn't raised, any money, but we had this beautiful website that encapsulated what we did, and it made it look like we were actually a real company. Yeah. And so when you're pitching, anybody, you want to elevate what you actually look like, where you actually are at.
Anybody looking here, start taking your classes on learning Figma because it's all about the branding.
Yep.
Because you can be the best salesperson in the world, but if you have zero marketing, you have zero branding, you're not gonna be selling anything. So branding and sales, it goes hand by hand.
The thing that makes being a founder very hard is that you have to wear many hats. And actually you can't even just be a generalist. You can't be a generalist. You have to be an expert in many things, which is a lot more than a generalist. And so after you get your design hat on and you put together these beautiful, a beautiful deck, a beautiful website, a beautiful product snapshot, well then if you're not a good engineer, you're not gonna be able to build it. And you're not gonna be able to deliver on what you actually told people you're gonna do. And that's just as bad. And then once you actually put together your beautiful designs, put together build your product, well then maybe you need partnerships. Okay, well figure out how to do that. Then you need more sales. How do you hire a sales team? You need to be good at hiring. You need to be good at, there's so many hats that you need to wear, which is why I think, it's not an easy skill to learn, but probably the most valuable skill for a founder to have is the ability to have a very quick learning time, like a very high learning rate in any skill. And I think that there are various hard skills that make you better at learning. For example, I love coding because it's not just a way of building things, but it's a way to think about things. Like I think about design the same way I think about engineering. Like they go, I've been coding for so long that's just how my brain thinks.
Yeah, and I think for any founders, like you said, they need to wear many hats. You need to, at first, especially at the beginning, you will have to do marketing, you will have to do sales, you will have to do customer service, you will have to do even things that you wouldn't even manage, and you're learning so many things. And I think that's also good, especially as a founder, because then you know the business from the inside out. And now, talking to you, this is your second business. You're the second time founder.
Yep.
After selling your company at 17, why did you decide to go again and build another business from scratch? Because it's hard. It's hard being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What made you take a decision of hey, you know what? I'm going to do another one.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, it's definitely hard to build a company. And I think that there's become a narrative, on a narrative in general that building a company is like a, sexy thing that we should all try to do. Raise money is a sexy thing. And I think especially the narrative around raising money or getting into Y Combinator or something like that, it's actually a very harmful narrative. And as an example, too many founders, it's kind of a tangent, but too many founders are set out to raise money. When in reality, fundraising is actually a byproduct of just building a great business, right? And if you build a great business, money will come. I've seen founders spend 2 years trying to raise their seed round. In reality, if they spent half the time just going out and spending all their time building their product, even if they're technical and they spent 2 years just trying to raise money so that they could, I don't know why. Instead, they should spend their time building a great business and money will come to them. It sounds crazy, but what's the expression is that if you build a beautiful garden, butterflies will come.
Exactly.
But regardless, the reason that I started Hypercard after my last company is, candidly, there's nothing more, there's no higher leverage than building a business in terms of everything, in terms of if someone asked me, what's the best investment? Where should I put my money as a young person? My friends that are in college now are asking me, where should I invest my money? What stocks should I buy? What crypto should I buy? But it's all bullshit because in reality, if you invest that money in yourself in whatever project that you have, even if it fails, the learnings that you'll receive from that project are 10 times more valuable than any money that you could make in the stock market. And so that's something that I embodied a lot with my last company and this company. My last company, I put a lot of my own money in to get it off the ground. And that first variation that we built completely failed. And I was pretty upset. I was I just put all my last money, all the money I made from fidget spinners is gone. But the lessons that I learned from building that first company, they compounded over time. I kept learning more and more and more. And eventually I could put them towards creating something that actually had a meaningful impact and an exit that could liquidate into money back to me.
When it comes to being a second time founder, was it easier for you?
It was not easy. But with Hypercard, I tackled a much harder problem than I did with my first company. And the next company I start after this, I don't care. If Hypercard makes me $10 billion, I'm going to start another company after this. And then I'm going to start another company after that one. Like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. There's nothing else that I want to do with my life other than build the ideas that I have. Building Hypercard was definitely not easier than building my last company, but I avoided a lot of the mistakes that I made in that first company. And even now, building Hypercard, man, we made so many mistakes in this company. Like, you make hundreds of mistakes that I know that for my next company, I'm not going to make those mistakes. My first company taught me the very valuable lesson of don't build before you sell, right? Like, don't get product marketing fit before you try to get product market fit. And then this company, I've learned so many lessons along the way around, how to be a better leader in my team, so many hard skills too, like how do I hire salespeople? How do I grow a sales team? How do I screen for good engineers? How do I what's the relationship I manage with my customers? How do I onboard customers into a more complex product? How do I run enterprise sales? These are all skills that, I've learned along the way with Hypercard, and they'll factor into the next company I start after this.
No. So for you, creating companies, creating business, you think that's kind of like your passion?
I think for me, it's probably my passion. I wouldn't even say is business. I just really love building things. Like, I love, after Hypercard, I think that I'll probably, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know, but it'll probably be something more in research or in a research or academic space. But I think that the beauty of startups is that the incentive structure of private corporations and companies in general is the ultimate incentive structure for fast growth and achieving things very quickly. And that's something that I didn't like about when I was at the University of Washington. I was working in PhD labs, and it sucked because there was a PhD student there that had been working there. He'd extended his PhD. It's been 6 years. If you're in a PhD on your 6th year, you're not doing anything. Yeah. It was a project that if it was a startup, they would have gotten it done in 3 months. Yeah. And the reason was this guy had no incentive to just had no urgency. Yeah. There was no urgency.
And that's one thing I always say, speed is everything in business. The faster you move, the faster you act, the faster you will reach your goals. If let's say you want to create a marketing campaign, do it today. Why wait a week? And that's the thing about startups, like you said. Yep. It's all about the speed, and it's like a game. We're playing your own game. And now, Nikolas, a question I have for you is that
actually, one thing I want to add to that's really important is, I think especially now with AI has basically democratized a lot of the hardest skills in the world. Maybe not the hardest in the world, but it's democratized a lot of skills. If you being a good copywriter, even in a couple of years, being a good engineer, it's going to be democratized. Anyone like yourself that you don't know how to code, let's say, you'll be able to write code as well as I can write code right now in a couple of years using AI. And so the only differentiator, especially if you're building a B2B SaaS company or any software product, the only key differentiator that you're going to have is speed of execution and probably distribution. But speed of execution is the one across everything, where the faster you're able to move and ship things and solve problems for people, that's going to be your only moat in the world of AI.
Shout out to Sheikh, I know she's watching this, but my co-founder is all about speed, and for me that's everything. And,
yep.
And we're always with that rhythm of hey, let's get things done, let's move faster. Because like I said, the faster we move, the faster we reach our goals. And now something I wanted to mention to you. So Nikolas, you raised $15 million at 19 years old from top leading investors like Sam Altman. How were you able to do this?
Yeah, so we raised $5 million of equity and $10 million of debt. We're a credit card company, so we offer debt, so we raise debt as well. And I think, like I said earlier, one of the big mistakes that especially first-time founders and especially young founders make is that there's a lot of sexiness around raising money. In reality, if you focus on just building a great business and focus on figuring out all of the problems associated with your business for yourself before. Actually, I'll give you an example. A lot of founders try to think about, hey, how do I convince an investor that this is worth their money? How do I convince an investor to give me this amount of money? In reality, the bigger question that you should be asking yourself is, how do you convince yourself that what you're trying to do is worth your time? That is the harder question to answer in reality. Is this actually worth your time? And I think if you can confidently answer to yourself that the company that you're starting is worth your time to pursue, then I think almost any investor is going to want to invest in you. And of course, it needs to be venture scalable and these other things, but there are a lot of founders these days that are raising money because it's cool, or the businesses that they're working on are not venture scalable. They could never have an exit that is as large as what venture funds want to see. I think for us, what did us a lot of favors in the fundraising process is that we were really confident ourselves in our idea, and we were confident there was something that was worth our time to pursue. And we had built, we had just started. We didn't let fundraising stop us from building the business. We built the business along the way. We signed an LOI with Lyft. We started coding. We signed our key vendors. We got a bank on board. We had Amex partnerships signed, so that when we actually did get money over, when we were starting to pitch investors, we had already made a lot of traction. And also here's the thing about fundraising. The most important thing to raising money is showing momentum to investors. That's the most important thing. If you can get on a call with an investor on Monday and then give them an update, and then on Wednesday, send them, here's what we did in the last 2 days. We signed this new customer, we built this, we did this. That's what an investor wants to see. They want to see that you're able to execute with speed. They want to see that you're able to actually do what you're able to say. Every day that you show an investor progress that they're not a part of, they're like, oh, I need to get involved here or else someone else is going to.
Yeah, wow. I think this is awesome. I think for everybody watching this is like a masterclass of how to raise money. And, I'm not being a bit controversial, but recently I met a YC combinator startup. 2 years, they raised a couple millions and they never made revenue. And he told me, hey, startups, all my investors, I think they're gonna close. And I was just thinking, I'm like, so 2 years in business and you never made revenue, never sold? And I just couldn't believe it. I'm but that's business. I'm a bootstrap guy, I'm like, and for me, it was we bootstrapped the business. We started making revenue. We started making profits. Business started picking up. And then investors started cutting us. We got calls from people, from very firms. Hey, I want to invest. We're like, hey, we want to still stay bootstrap. But it was because they saw the traction. They saw that we were making money. They saw that we had clients. So traction is a must. And I think that what you said about having already people in the line, because obviously for you have to build a product, but having people in the line is so fundamental. So no, I think this is a masterclass, and thank you for sharing all this knowledge.
Yeah. And I think one more thing to add there too is that, when I started getting into business and startups, it was around the time of the hype cycle that was in 2021 and 2020 and 2019. This is the time when growth stocks in the stock market were pumping 100, 200% month over month and crazy stuff. And that is and during that time, it was you could snap your fingers and raise money. But I think it's very important. I actually think that as a founder, a very, very important skill is to know what is bullshit and what's not bullshit. And because 90% of things you're going to see are complete bullshit. And so, when I saw that, there were companies where going out and raising that huge round in 2021 so that you can last, that's 10 years of runway for you or whatever. Certainly there were times where that was a good decision. But in reality, in most cases, most companies that raised huge rounds in 2021 that had good traction since then, but not insane traction that can justify that insane round that they raised a couple of years ago, they're just dead now. And so raising money can also be a double-edged sword. right? Like the goal of raising money should not be to maximize your valuation at all times. That's not what it should be. And I know a lot of companies that have tried to raise at, 200x revenue multiples or whatever, and they're just dead now because everyone was congratulating them. They got the TechCrunch article, they're wearing their little suits, but now their companies are dead because they can't raise at a 200x revenue multiple again, right? And so it's very important, with my last company that we sold, it was bootstrapped as well. So I bootstrapped that company, and a lot of people told me, hey, why don't you just go raise money? It'd be easy right now. You could probably raise a decent Series A with your traction. But it was very important for us. I really think that having the business fundamentals that come with running a bootstrap business, that those translate very well now into us running a venture-backed business. Because I have not lost sight of, needing to actually make money as a business, right? And there's certain times where you should invest in growth and you should not be profitable to grow your business. But ultimately it's an equation that needs to work out at some point. And in 2021, there were so many startups. And even today, a lot of companies still embody this ethos where it's like, yeah, we're not going to be profitable until $1 trillion of transaction volume. Yeah. Like, what kind of business is that?
No, definitely. No, and I think what you said about having the fundamental skills for the bootstrap business and then going to do the startup, I think that, now thinking about it, I think that's phenomenal, and it's working well for you. And another question, talking about fundraising, raising rounds. So the CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, invested in you.
Yep.
He's your leader investor.
Yep.
How did this occur?
Yeah, this was an interesting case because I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to meet Sam. And I told him, hey, I just sold my company. I'm thinking about starting something new. And he said, okay, here's my phone number. Stay in touch. And I actually didn't text him for a couple of years because I was like, sure, I can stay in touch with this guy for the sake of networking, but I'm not going to waste this guy's time with some little follow-up here and then so he can remember my name. I think it's very important that, especially with people who are very busy, every touch point that you have with them, it needs to be something valuable for them. So even today, I'm very careful with, we're all very careful with Sam's time because he's very busy. But we know that when we do ask him something, and when we do that, we call the banners, he's able to plug in because we only ask for him when it's very, very important. And I think that's something that a lot of founders also get wrong with fundraising. They think that their investor's job is just to wire the money and then never speak to them again. Or they think that your investors are just going to give you the money and then they're going to ask every month for a little report on how your business is doing. That's not how it should be done. That's not how we did it. Whenever when we went out to raise money, we qualify our investors. It's not the other way around. We make sure that what are you going to actually do for my business? How are you going to help move my business forward? And I regret giving allocation to investors that have not done anything for me today because I could have taken that money and given it to someone that would actually move my business forward. This is actually a crazy story. Something that I didn't realize because when I started Hypercard, it was my first time actually fundraising. My co-founder, Mark, had fundraised before. I learned a lot of these lessons from him. He's an amazing fundraiser. And what was really interesting is venture capitalists are not afraid to waste your time. These people will get in a call with you. We set out to raise $5 million. That was not an arbitrary number. We calculated that because that's what, how much we needed to partner with a bank and to sign enough time to build out our product, et cetera, et cetera. We would get on calls with venture capitalists and we'd ask them, okay, how big is your fund? How many checks have you written? How much is reserved for follow-on, et cetera, et cetera. Basically calculating what's your average check size, basically calculating if they can even invest in our company. If they can even, what are your ownership targets? If a fund is a small fund, like a $50 million fund, they've already deployed 25 million. They keep 50% for follow-on, and their average check size is $5 million. It's very unlikely chance that they're going to be able to write a $3 or $4 million check into our company. And if their ownership targets are X%, whatever it is, if it's a if it's a high percentage, they're not going to be able to give me a couple $1 million. They literally don't have it in their fund, but they'll still waste your time and take the call so that they can get intel in your company. Like, it's crazy. And so I always lead, of course, be respectful of their time, but I'll ask them these questions because I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to waste my time. And we also spent a lot of time talking to investors that were pitching, and we asked them, hey, what can you do for me? You can make these introductions to customers. You can introduce me to these banks or these lenders, et cetera, et cetera. And what that's resulted in is we have a cap table of probably 60 to 70 people where all of them are like an extension of our team. They invested in our company, they have equity in our business, and they all have a specific role in moving our business forward. And of course, it's not like a daily obligation, but when we call on them, we expect that they get back, and they have.
Yeah, well, I think it's just great. It's not only about the money, it's about what you also get. And always, entrepreneurship, I like to call it like a roller coaster.
Yep.
That's where highs and downs. I can be the same day. The same day you can lose your biggest client and then get the biggest deal.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of ups and downs, but I wanted to know more about you, especially because you're a young entrepreneur. You started this very young. For you, what was the toughest point in your life in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think that something that's really hard about entrepreneurship is that even when you're going through, hard times in your business or something that you were only exposed to, you lost a customer that you were pitching or one of your investors pulled out last minute, you still have to show up to your team and be motivating and be organized and be on top of everything, right? Like you have to put your best foot forward at all times. And there's been plenty of times where we've had setbacks, but I always remind myself that if I fail at building, if I fall and I don't get back up from these setbacks, if I fail from these setbacks, then I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything that's harder than this. Yeah. And I have goals in my life to do things that are 100 times harder than Hypercard. And Hypercard is already 100 times harder than my last company. And so if I'm not able to do Hypercard and succeed at this, how am I going to be able to do those things that are way harder? And I also firmly believe that like I said before, the only difference between a successful entrepreneur and a not successful entrepreneur is how many times can you fall down and just get back up. And throughout my time of building companies, I've probably been knocked down hundreds of times, like hundreds and hundreds of times.
Anything specific that you were like, wow.
Yeah,
that you were like, yeah, I just did rock battle.
Yeah, with my last company, we, imagine I had worked on one iteration of the company, it failed. I went to another iteration, and I put all my money. I put all my money that I had into this. We bootstrapped it. All the money I had, I put all of my time. I was working 100-hour weeks on this company. I was failing all my classes. I was paying for my college education, which I wasn't doing anything with. I was failing my classes, paying for my college, put all my money into my business, and then that even failed. That second iteration of that company failed. So I'd worked on one iteration, it failed. I doubled down, I put my 100% into that second iteration, it failed. I was literally left with nothing except for the lessons that I learned from that failure. And then decided, okay, let me try again, one more time. And fortunately, that was the one where it started to get traction. And that was the one where I had learned the lessons of like, okay, well, before I go and spend, 100-hour weeks for 12 weeks building something, let me go sell it. And let me learn design. I went onto YouTube, my favorite teacher, watched Figma lessons, learned how to use Figma. Actually, even back then, there wasn't even Figma. It was Sketch I was using, if you remember that. And I put together I wasn't raising money, but I put together a customer deck, pitched it to a couple customers, and we had people sign. And I was like, wow, okay, well, this is how I'm going to do it from now on, going forward. But at that setback, there was 100 other variations where I would have just given up. And right now I would have been, a software engineer at some company, for sure.
Well, these are the stories why I do a podcast, because it's it's incredible to hear, and it's all the same. If we all put in context, it's all about the same. It's about failing, getting back, and going again. When I started the business, one woman in New York City changed my life. It was like a working table, and she was like 80 something, very powerful woman. And I was just asking questions, because for me, was knowledge and wisdom is one thing that I needed to know at the time, because I was on the first 6 months. She puts a paper and she says, like, when you start entrepreneurship, you're right here. Let's say you start your first business, you go here with the fails, and this is your goal.
Yep.
When you start your second business, you don't start over here, you start here.
Yeah.
And you already have the skill sets.
Yep.
Like this and like this, and every time you get closer.
Yep.
Once in a while, there might be the entrepreneur that might go from here to the goal in the first try.
Yep.
Most of it is just about walking and getting to the goal. And for me, and then after that was like, it doesn't matter if I fail, as long as I build those skill sets.
Yep.
I'm gonna be strong enough, or like knowledge enough to be able to go with the second try.
Yep.
And I think you're a clear example of doing that, of failing, learning, becoming better, and keep going. I applaud you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the most important thing for sure.
Yeah, and well, I think now as we are in the end of the podcast, I would like to ask you a question for all the entrepreneurs, in specific young entrepreneurs that are watching this. Picture Nikolas at 12 watching this. What advice will you give to Nikolas at 12?
Yeah, I think don't lose the ambition that you had as a kid when your kindergarten teacher asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you said, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be the president. Don't lose that ambition, because to be honest, all you need is, if you have enough hope and enough ambition that you can actually go do something. If you're actually crazy enough to think that you can go and do something, then those are the ones that actually go and do that thing. It's like, what's the Steve Jobs quote? Only something about the crazy ones. To the crazy ones who actually try are the ones who succeed or something. But don't lose the ambition that you had as a kid. Learn to love and embrace the hard times. The hard times are the ones that create the good times, and just keep going.
Also, and for Hypercard, is there anything in specific that's coming up that you want the audience to know?
Yeah, I mean, plenty of things. Check out our website, hypercard.com. We're hiring for a sales role. If you are a top performing AE with an SDR background as well, come shoot me a message. I'm nik@hypercard.com. And yeah.
And everything would be also right here in the screen, or the website, social media, so you guys can check it out. And then Nick, I think this is one of the really podcast I learned the most. So thank you so much for coming here. It was a pleasure to have you in the Interlix Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, man. Take care.